Hello, BookTube. The Inconsistent Reader here again with part 18, Reading Room. Now, Hannah's made it past her probationary period and is now a supplicant aunt. She won't be a full aunt until she goes on her Pearl Girl mission and comes back successfully. She talks about seeing Jade at the Thanksgiving ceremony, judged her briefly, but didn't think much about it later. She was getting excited about becoming Pearl Girl, and then a real full aunt, because after all, and I quote, I was still a full and true believer, if not in everything about Gilead, at least in the unselfish service of the aunts. Hannah tells us all the new pearls that come in to become aunts are observed for a while to see where they would best be served. And she wonders how well Jade can handle the particulation. It may have been a shock to her to witness two men being literally ripped apart by handmaids. The handmaids are usually so subdued, and the display of so much rage on their part can be alarming. No shit. Especially when they're just walking along 2 by 2 quietly in rows, and then you see them like go all rage machine. Hulk on him. Hannah tells us that while the particulation is some extreme horror and gore, and not necessarily how she would punish people, she was glad to see that Dr. Grove had been taken care of. Aunt Lydia knocked on Becca and Hannah's dorm room. She had Nicole with her, and I quote, Aunt Victoria, Aunt Immortelle, you have been chosen for a very special duty, she said. Our newest pearl, Jade, has been assigned to you. Here's where we learn that Hannah has chosen the name Victoria for her aunt name. Lydia tells them that it's up to them to get her up to speed on the ways of Gilead. And I quote, My heart fell. Already I knew that the outwardly placid life Becca and I had been leading at Ardua Hall for the past 9 years was at an end. Change had come. But I did not yet grasp how wrenching that change would be. Hannah talks about how they haven't had to deal with, well, basically the real world, the real outside world, and weren't hardened like the rest of the aunts. And I quote, I'm afraid we did not fully appreciate the extent to which those of Aunt Lydia's generation had been hardened in the fire. They had a ruthlessness about them that we lacked. Now, I bet if Hannah could channel some rage about Dr. Grove, same for Becca, they could probably find some ruthlessness. I mean, she did enjoy that he was killed, not the way he was killed, but she's glad that he's dead because of what happened to her, so that's something. In this next chapter, we go back in time. We go back to when Hannah first got to Ardua Hall. She's talking to Becca, and Becca tells her, I always looked up to you in school. You lied less than the others, and you were nice to me. That's really sad that she really feels like Hannah's her only friend. Now, remember, when they meet Nicole for the first time, they had already been living in Ardua Hall for 9 years. So when she first gets there, Becca's telling her all kinds of stuff. She tells her about Latin, and Hannah's like, what's Latin? And then she tells her some other things, and Hannah's like, how do you know that? Becca tells her, well, I read about it in the library. To which Hannah asks, what's a library? Fuck me. The dummening is real. Wait, that's not how you spell dummening. Wait, dummening isn't even a word. Anyway, Hannah then asks Becca if the books are wicked. Becca tells her she hasn't read any yet, but the dangerous ones are locked up in the reading room, which you need special permission to go into. If you read anything without permission, you will be sent to the cellar for a correction, which of course is given by Aunt Vidala. I wonder what her former career was. She is vicious, and she loves to discipline violently. Corrections were a form of punishment, she told Hannah, and Hannah's like, I thought punishments were done in public. Becca's like, yeah, normally, but corrections are different. They're for your own good. In my opinion, however, They just don't want to publicize their mistakes, so they take care of stuff in-house. They don't want to look like there's chaos going on at Ardua Hall, like they can't control these girls. This is what I believe. Anyway, Becca just kind of brushes past all that and tells Hannah she needs an outfit and a new name. And there is a list of approved names. Apparently, the names are former products from our previous lives, and they're supposed to put the girls at ease. But these girls are so young that they don't even know what these products are. And I quote, "She read the list of names out to me, since I could not read yet. 'What about Maybelline?' she said. 'That sounds pretty. Aunt Maybelline.'" Maybe it's Maybelline. I just wanted to share that because it's funny. Maybelline. But Hannah said it was too frilly for her. Hannah's talking with Becca about how scary it's going to be to leave Gilead to go on the Pearl Girls mission. Becca reassures her that Gilead's not really that big. She'll show her on a map. And I quote, I must have looked confused because she smiled. "A map is like a picture. We learn to read maps here." "Read a picture," I said. "How can you do that? Pictures aren't writing." How can you read a map with pictures? It's hilarious. It's sad and hilarious. Hannah wonders if she can even make the 6 months. The staring at the ground, the not speaking unless spoken to, and I quote, "Obedience, subservience, docility. These were the virtues required." Gross. I doubt I'd make it. But maybe I'd try so I could, read books, educate myself. Hannah found the reading super frustrating, and Becca tells her, and I quote, "You have a knack," said Becca. "You're way better than I was when I began." That's something, I think. It's always frustrating when you're learning new things because you feel like you should be getting it right away. And of course you're not going to get it right away. Everything takes practice and patience, of which most people don't possess. She was reading a book called Dick and Jane, and she was amazed how these people lived. Just a small white picket fence, no guardians, kids playing in the front yard, skirts above the knee. Oh my God, craziness. Becca tells her painting clothes on these people is going to be one of her jobs as a supplicant aunt. She also lets Hannah know not everyone can cut it as an aunt. Which we know, like some of them get sent to be a handmaid, some of them go be O'Connell wives, and other various things in Gilead. Before Hannah got there, there were 2 girls who didn't work out. One went back to her parents and her arranged marriage, but the other one was bad. They found her only when the water started tasting funny. Aunt Lily was her name. They found her in the rooftop rainwater cistern. At first they suspected foul play. The aunts even let eyes in to look for clues. This is a big deal because men are not allowed in Ardua Hall. Ever. This is a big deal that they wanted to see if she was murdered or not. But they didn't find any clues. Besides which, there was a ladder and a door. And the rumor was she also had rocks in her pockets. Hannah was just like, why would she want to die? Becca tells her, and I quote, "No one wants to die," she said, "but some people don't want to live in any of the ways that are allowed." Now, after Dick and Jane was mastered, she read a book of poetry written by Aunt Vidala herself. 10 Tales for Young Girls. Basically, it's like The Simpsons, don't do what Johnny Don't does, right? And as much as she hated reading about girls getting punished or killed, she sure was happy that she could read at all. Like, think about that. You're just so happy that you can actually read these books that you kind of don't really care what you're reading. You're just excited that you can actually read it. Now, in her 2nd month at Ardua Hall, Shunammite came to visit her. She asked if Hannah was all right, because Paula made it seem like she had lost it. And Hannah's like, "No, dude, I'm fine." And I quote, "You're not mad at me?" said. "Why would I be mad at you, as you say?" Well, I stole your husband. Is that what she thought? And good luck with that, psychopath Shunammite. You're gonna need it. Let's hope you last longer than the others. They chat a bit, but she's the same old Shunammite, and it's starting to wear thin for Hannah. And I quote, "You don't like me anymore," Shunammite said, half seriously. "I'm training to be an aunt," she said. "I'm not really supposed to like anyone." Now, she also learned how to write, and with that knowledge, she learned this, and I quote, "Being able to read and write did not provide the answers to all questions. It led to other questions, and then to others." Right? That's what happens when you're educating yourself. You want to know why this is this way, why that is that way, and then you keep going down that rabbit hole until you think you figure everything out. Hannah didn't mind most of the chores, except having to clean the toilet 3 times. 3 times! Unreasonable. Becca tells her, and I quote, "Yes, that's why it's a test. They want to see if you'll obey unreasonable demands without complaining." That's what it takes to be an aunt, right? Duh! If you can't hack the tests, you definitely won't be able to handle being an aunt. What do people think tests are for? Thanks to Becca, Hannah makes it through her probationary period. And she finally gets access to the library. And I quote, "It's hard to describe the feeling this gave me. The first time I passed through its doors, I felt as if a golden key had been given to me. A key that would unlock one secret door after another, revealing to me the riches that lay within. After a time, I was given a pass to the reading room. In there, I had my own desk." She's so happy to get to read and have a desk. It's crazy. One of her jobs as a supplicant was to make copies of Lydia's speeches or sermons, and she would often use the same ones. She would just switch up stuff a little bit, and then she would add in Lydia's handwritten side notes. For this, she also had to learn how to type, which she found hard at first, of course, as well. And the years went by, and Becca and Hannah became best friends, telling each other things they never dared to speak aloud. And Becca tells her, and I quote, "I wish I had a sister," she said to me one day. "And if I did, that person would be you." It's so sweet. Now, after 4 years, Hannah is finally granted access to the full Bible. Becca, of course, was granted access first, but they weren't allowed to talk to each other about it. Becca, however, feels the need to warn Hannah about some of it, and I quote, "It doesn't say what they say it says." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I don't want you to be too disappointed." Judges 19-21. Ah, the concubine story. There was no noble sacrifice, no choice for the concubine, just shoved out the door as a substitute in her owner's place. Then her owner cut her into pieces. After reading the story, Hannah is just shocked. Like, how could sweet old Aunt Esty lie to us like that? And I quote, "The truth was not noble. It was horrible." This was what the aunts meant then, when they said women's minds were too weak for reading. We would crumble. We would fall apart under the contradictions. Up until that time, I had not seriously doubted the rightness and especially the truthfulness of Gilead's theology. But as I discovered what had been changed by Gilead, what had been added, and what had been omitted, I feared I might lose my faith. Let's discuss. Just because you're upset and question things does not mean you're weak. You crumble a little, that's okay, you're a human. And if you have a soul or any sort of moral compass, things that are horrible should affect you. But if you can pick yourself back up, dust yourself off, and keep living, you're going to make it and you're going to be stronger for it. She talks about her crisis of faith with Becca, and Becca's like, yeah, I went through that too. Everybody's a liar, and I quote, God isn't what they say, she said. She said, you could believe in Gilead, or you could believe in God, but not both. Secretly, I feared that I would be unable to believe in either. The next chapter is 3 years after her first crisis of faith. She went to her desk, and behind her normal silver folder with speeches was a blue folder. Interesting. When she opened the folder, she saw Paula's name at the top. Remember her stepmother, Paula? The story that her handmaid killed her husband? Bullshit. Apparently what had happened was Paula and Commander Kyle had been having an affair before Tabitha even died. Paula told her handmaid she knew she was unhappy and would help her escape. She gives her a bullshit map and made-up Mayday contacts, and while her handmaid is gone, she murders her husband and bribes her Martha to say it was the handmaid. I knew Paula was a piece of trash, but this really goes to show you when you hear the real story. Well, of course, they caught her handmaid, and she admitted to running away, but she was adamant about not having murdered the commander. However, after a bit of torture, of course, she confessed falsely and was hung on the wall. After reading all this, Hannah's just like, what the fuck? Who is giving me this dangerous information? And I quote, was an effort being made to turn me against Gilead? Her first file she got, and she's like, oh shit, why am I getting this? Is this, is somebody wanting me to turn against Gilead, and why? So she wondered now if Paula had murdered Tabitha. And she also wonders if Paula's crimes are what got Hannah a pass into Ardua Hall. I'm gonna say yes. Obviously they know what really happened there, and she probably threatened to bring it all out and get them all in trouble. She couldn't talk with Becca about this one. After all, she didn't know where these folders were coming from, and she wasn't about to get Becca in trouble with her. She finished her work and left the blue file how she found it, and the next day, it was gone. And over the next 2 years, she kept receiving these random files. Colors of the rainbow, sort of. Blue were wives, black commanders, gray doctors, striped econo people, green Marthas. She never received a folder about handmaids or aunts' crimes. And I quote, beneath its outer show of virtue and purity, Gilead was rotting. But honestly, when wasn't it rotting? I mean, in my opinion, it was never fresh. She was given Judd's file, and it was thick. Evidence he murdered all his previous wives. And I quote, I'd narrowly avoided a death sentence, it seemed, and I'd had help avoiding it. I said a prayer of gratitude that night, and help Shunammite, for she will surely need it. No shit. And we'll learn more about Shunammite later. At first, Hannah's like, why the fuck am I being given these folders? Is this some kind of test? Should I be saying something? Should I be keeping my mouth shut like I am? What is up with this? Learning to store secrets and use them when appropriate, maybe? And I quote, all this power, all of this potential to judge the wicked in silence and to punish them in ways they would not be able to anticipate. All of this vengeance. And that's the end of section 18, Reading Room. What do you guys think? Why do you think Lydia is feeding her all this information? Is Hannah one of her backup plans, perhaps? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, thanks for watching this episode with me, the Inconsistent Reader. Next up, section 19, Study, starring our dear Aunt Lydia. And as always, guys, make good choices.